Welcome to When We're Not Hustling, a podcast where sex workers talk about everything but. I'm your host, Jessie Sage.
Put away the lingerie. I want to know you. Tell me more. I don't care about the news. I'd rather hear about you and see the world from your point of view. The coffee's already made, so I park the sheets, just pull up a chair and tell me more.
When We're Not Hustling is a weekly podcast that explores the lives and identities of sex workers outside of our work personas, our personal philosophies, ambitions, families, relationships, passions, spirituality, and so much more. We talk about our lives beyond the job, asking, what does the flexibility of sex work allow us to do, and who does it allow us to be? On this show, we learn who sex workers are outside of the work we're known for. When We're Not Hustling is an exploration of the people behind the fantasies. When We're Not Hustling is brought to you by Assembly 4. Assembly 4 is a collective of sex workers and technologists working to bring the overall cost of sex work down through their advertising platform, Tryst.link. They also educate clients through the Good Client Guide and provide resources and articles written by and for sex workers. Assembly 4 caters to all genders and demographics and raises funds to fight for sex worker rights and against exploitation in the sex industry. Learn more at assembly4.com. ASSEMBLYFOUR.com. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I'm your host, Jessie Sage. It is now August, and that means that we have a new after party co-host that's going to be with us for the entire month. That this month, it is going to be my good friend, Ashley Ramos, who is a Pittsburgh-based artist. And some of you who followed me on socials probably know who she is because she's my bestie, and we spend a lot of time together she's been on my socials, all over my socials for the last 5 or 6 years. But anyways, I'm excited to have her here to digest all of the episodes with Emily and I. For those of you who are still trying to get into the hang of how this podcast works, every Monday we have a new episode and with a new guest. And every Wednesday we have an after party where the guest is no longer there, but Emily, the producer, and I and one other person talk about what we got out of the episode. So all month of July, my mom was the guest host, and in August, it's going to be Ashley. We have 4 amazing guests this month. Jelena Vermilion is who we are going to be talking to today, and she is a wealth of information, so I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Next week, we have on Charlotte Shane, who is a sex worker and a writer. I've interviewed Charlotte before about her last book, Prostitute Laundry, for another podcast that I used to host, but we have her on today talking about her new book, and that's going to be a really great interview as well. We also have Amber Glow on. She's the 3rd interview of July. She's a disabled sex worker in Florida, and she's going to be talking about disability and sex work and somatic sex education and body work, and I think that's also be really great. Our last guest of August is Maya Bates. She is a longtime cam performer and clip producer, and she started a badass all women's construction company. So she's going to be talking to us about construction. So we have a great lineup this month. I wanted to also say that I am so grateful that I've gotten so many messages from people who are really enjoying the show and seem to understand what the show is all about. I wanted to let you know that I do read all of the messages you send. So if you want to send us an email to nothustling@proton.me, I will read those messages. If you want to send us a DM, likewise. But yesterday I got a very nice email from somebody whose name I'm going to redact just for his privacy. But I did want to share it with you. He said, "Hi, Jessie. Thank you for the work you're putting into when we're not hustling. I've really enjoyed listening to it and the diversity within the episodes, but my favorite aspect is the humanization of sex work. I'm a pastor in a non-evangelical tradition, and I'm also someone who has turned to sex workers from time to time. Initially, I thought of doing so as a grand moral failure, but over time, and as I've listened to your podcast, I've shifted to cultivate an appreciation for the way deeply human encounters can be both liberating and healing. I've also appreciated hearing the ways others express spirituality through their work as well as their interest beyond their work. So thank you for the work you're doing. That is so meaningful to me. So thank you for sending that. I appreciate it more than you know. It's so neat. Emily and I, when we created the show, put a lot of work into thinking about what we wanted people to get out of it. And when I get messages that really show that you're getting exactly what I want you to get out of it, I'm deeply appreciative for your attention and for going out of your way to send me those messages. So please feel free to reach out with comments or questions or anything you would like to. I would love to hear from you. Let me see. Do I have any other announcements? This season, we're in the middle of, not in the middle, we're kind of at the beginning of season 2, but we are into season 2. And I want to remind you that we have a Patreon. Our Patreon is patreon.com/sapiotextual. And there, if you pledge at $5 a month or more, you can get next week's episode on Patreon before everybody else. Let me see. I think that's it for now. I want to go ahead and introduce Helena. She is the founder and executive director of Swap Hamilton, is a trans femme full-service sex worker, porn performer, and activist for almost a decade who lives with disabilities. She also has limited experiences being incarcerated, being homeless, working outdoors and on the street, and as an undocumented migrant in the U.S. She has been featured on several national media outlets speaking about the decriminalization of the sale trade of sexual services. She also most recently won the YWCA's Women of Distinction Award in 2024. Notably, she has guest lectured at McMaster's University, the University of Guelph, Waterloo, Wilfrid Lauren, York, Queens, and the University of Toronto. So I am very pleased to have her join us today. Hi, it is so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. Do you want me to do my spiel or how do you want?
Yeah.
So it's Jelena Vermilion. I am based in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and I am a lot of things, but I am a full service sex worker of over a decade now. I was a porn performer. I can't say I'm still a porn performer because I haven't really worked in that in a while, but certainly.
Well, you won some like porn awards and stuff, though, didn't you? You were like a pretty serious porn performer. Okay, well, that's more than I did. I was nominated, but I did not win.
I mean, nominations are like, when we're talking about porn videos, I'm kind of like, but you know, yeah, right. It was the
I probably had some guy who like voted for me every day.
I mean, and also the fact that we have to essentially use our Twitters to like rally our own voters. It ends up feeling like a popularity contest. But that year actually had nothing to do with it. So I was in the sense of the voting. So I'm very glad that it ended up that way. It was a surprise.
Yeah, I also don't do that. I like full service better.
I agree. For me, I kind of feel like it's more honest work. And not to say that pornography work isn't honest work or it's dishonest work, but rather to say that I just feel like the amount of labor I'm doing is equitable and it's whatever, like a more equitable exchange for what I'm receiving. And I think that it also, you have a lot more gaps of time in porn production and like the structure perhaps is a lot less, a lot more. There's more opportunity for discordance in the production of porn as opposed to, you know, seeing a client.
You have a lot of like, so now you're doing mostly full service, and I have been following you for a long time and realized that you're also in school right now. So tell me a little bit about that.
I'm in nursing school. I'm at Mohawk College, but we'll see how long that lasts. I've actually been a bit of a rabble rouser. So if I may, my nursing school journey started September of last year, but it coincided with a lot of the advocacy work I do. And my advocacy work has caused like controversy even within the faculty. So I won
at the nursing school. Well, tell me, let's go back a little bit. Tell me what made you decide to go to nursing school?
My mother was a nurse.
Okay.
She was in geriatrics, oncology, and palliative, and so
Gosh, that sounds really intense.
Yeah, I went into PSW, which is personal support worker, which is essentially healthcare aid, the equivalent of a healthcare aid, which is below a nurse. In 2020, during the pandemic, I did some college. I got that diploma, and I wanted to upgrade. Part of it, honestly, was out of spite. Because I was sick and tired of being a person who does sex work talking about sex work. Because as much as I am eloquent, as much as I am effective with my messaging, as much as I am white, and then my message gets assimilated and carried more because I am white.
Yeah.
In spite of not being racial, it's
right.
I still find that there are obstacles to the message getting there. So I wanted to be a nurse talking about sex work. I wanted to stand behind the respectability and the knowledge and the skills of the profession, the caring nature of the profession, which I very much embody. I think that I also got my geriatric certificate. I got my pallium certificate. So I basically just wanted to increase and prove to myself and accomplish something in a secular sense that is very well respected and also requires, because I've always had interest in medical science, pharmacology and the human experience. And I would actually like to point out that there's a lot of similarities between nursing and whoring.
I would think so. Yeah.
We're talking about the sacred moments, the very sensitive moments that you can be privy to as a nurse, and essentially being a nurse is being a witness, and so is being a sex worker. The bodily fluids that we're dealing with on a daily basis, maybe they're not the same bodily fluids necessarily, but they are always intimate bodily fluids that we're either interacting with or handling, dealing with, having contact with in some form. I definitely see and I know one of our colleagues, Matilda Bickers, who we did the Working It book together. She is also going to nursing, and we talked sort of about the sex work to nursing pipeline that kind of exists, or healthcare pipeline.
I wasn't a healthcare worker, but I was a doula for a while before I became a sex worker, and actually went into sex work for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that I was like, I'm doing this doula work. It is very intimate. You're going into a space where people are having like one of the most heightened experiences of their lives, like walking them through that, witnessing that, but I can't sustain this financially. And it felt to me like going into sex work was more or less doing the same job, but for like a sustainable amount of money.
That's so real. Funny that you mentioned doula, because I also mentioned that I also have my end of life doula certificate.
That's amazing.
So very interesting that you also have sort of seen that kind of like culmination of like care, service work, as it relates to healthcare, or like just servicing another person,
Right. Yeah. I think it's a very specific experience to be able to walk in with to an intimate moment with a stranger, be whatever that is, in illness or in death or in birth or in sex, and be there with them.
Kind of think of it like an anti-rake, if you know what I mean, in the sense of like a rake being a person who is like Machiavellian, or like gonna sort of form their personality to try and get what to pretend that they can offer you what you want and need, and exploit you. I kind of think of like the role that sex workers and nurses and like healthcare workers and like what you just described as being like the anti-rake. Like, we are not here and to take something from you. We're not here to, whatever that might be.
Or to even change the experience for you. And that's another thing that, like, when I was a doula, I remember like every single birth was obviously so different. And you were dealing with like couple dynamics too. And being like, okay, so what can I do to not interrupt these two while they're doing something, but just to like be a help, like in whatever dynamic they have, and even if that means I'm going to spend the whole time trying to get the mother-in-law to like not come in the room or like whatever it is that they want, you know?
That's funny. Always a mother-in-law, monster-in-law.
Yeah. So you started that and you kind of hinted that it's your advocacy is causing trouble. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure can. So just a little bit before school, in 2022, I was actually assaulted by a Hamilton police officer. And that was the result of harassment over a protracted period of time from my landlord. He learned that, he knew I was trans shortly thereafter moving in, but then he at some point learned that I do sex work, and started to harass me.
The landlord did?
Well, I can't say the landlord did. I can say that legally, I can't say that the landlord did because of the settlement, but I can say that the superintendent and his wife absolutely did harass me. And there was also some a finding from the Law Society of Ontario, my landlord's paralegal, there was a finding of uncivil, unprofessional behavior and sexual harassment of myself. Because he kept being like, they wouldn't remove the ice from the walkway. And then they were like, well, why don't you ask your clients? Why don't you just negotiate a lesser price with your clients? And then, because we all know you sell sex for $300 an hour. And he would repeatedly email this to me. And it was like, the point was to have me voluntarily leave my residence, but I won, long story short. And so they had called the police officer assaulted me. I had gotten arrested and demoted.
Oh my God.
So that's kind of like my reputation in Hamilton, is that I was assaulted by a cop in the attempt of my landlord to gentrify the apartment. But I stayed, and I got the apartment was able to be waterproofed and fireproofed because he was using the apartment contrary to the house that he owns zoning. And so because I stayed and I put my foot down, he had to spend over $50,000 renovating the apartment. I stayed. I got to sue him because of all the harassment. I won.
That's amazing. Good for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I sued the police. I won. And so that's kind of like my reputation. And then
that's a big reputation. Yeah.
I try. And then when I went into nursing school, it started August or September of last year, the course. So I've been in it for just over, just since September.
Just a year, yeah.
And the YWCA award is an award for the women of distinction that I had won in March of this year. But prior to that, in September, I was actually assaulted. I was concussed by a second person at the Take Back the Night March, which is, of course, a very instrumental march that women host.
So you were assaulted at the march?
I was assaulted at the march. It was actually... If I looked at my Twitter analytics for the first time only recently, and that was actually the highest views. I've had 121,000 views on that day alone, on that post alone, because the video, my friend captured the moment where what it was we were holding a banner, a sex work banner at the front of the march, decriminalize now, decriminalization saves lives, or whatever my sign said.
Yeah.
He went specifically for that banner. There was a man that had walked to if this is the march, he had walked towards the march.
Oh, wow.
Grabbed the banner out of my hand and the hand of the person who I was walking with.
Yeah.
So I ran after him to retrieve the banner because I wasn't just going to let even the optics look like he got something from us, especially such a monumental, woman-centered safety rally, essentially, about taking back safe spaces and allowing ourselves to be safe wherever we are.
Right.
I didn't want, as a trans woman, as a sex worker, as a person participating in that march, for other women to feel crestfallen. And so I ran after him and I grabbed it and he basically wrestled it and he whipped me around. And so my head I had like a 75% concussion because my brain did like a revolution, not a revolution, obviously.
Yeah.
It rotated slightly. And so I got concussed. It was actually ruled by...
Is that what a concussion means? Is that what happens when you get this is a dumb question, but is that what happens when you get, it rattles your brain?
Yeah, it's essentially a sloshing or a bruising of the brain hitting the inside of your skull. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and it was, so that happened. It was ruled as a hate crime, like a hate motivating incident or whatever it's called, by our police service, which was very controversial because they almost didn't charge the guy. And the only reason he was charged is because there was like a cisgender white mom who grabbed the sergeant on the scene's arm and was like, he assaulted her. You better like, they wouldn't have done anything if it wasn't for like the people at the march who were in solidarity with me, frankly. And so I won the Women of Distinction Award after in March of this year.
Okay.
And I referred to in my acceptance speech the police violence that has occurred, not just to me, but also to other people in Hamilton and sex workers.
Yeah.
And I referred to, sorry to jump back in time again.
No. This
all over the
story
place.
is amazing. Yeah, keep going.
In February of 2023, there was a woman, or it might have been 22. I forget. I think it was, I apologize. It was in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's all blurred together because of
I understand.
life.
Yeah.
But in February of, I believe it was last year.
Okay.
Wait, you know what? I have the article. One second. It was 2022. February of 2022, there was a woman who was attacked on Barton Street in an alleyway near the intersection of Barton and Emerald. And Barton is the stroll where street-based sex work. It was close to the Swap Hamilton drop-in space that we used to have at that time for 1 year.
And you run Swap Hamilton.
I do. I'm the founder. So,
awesome.
Sex Workers Action Program, Hamilton. Yeah. And this woman was nearly killed. She was working on the street and she was pulled into the alley. She had absolutely disgusting, like severe injuries. She had a broken jaw, broken nose, 2 brain bleeds. Her elbow was raw from him dragging her. I visited her in the hospital when she was still in a coma.
Oh my God. Terrible.
Yeah, sorry. And so what we did is, as Swap Hamilton, I was absolutely heartbroken by this incident. And so I rebuked it. I did everything I could. I did a press release. I organized a vigil because we weren't sure at the time that we held the vigil if she was going to live or not. Thank God she did. But she had to relearn how to walk. That's how badly she was injured. She had to relearn how to talk, how to feed herself.
Terrible.
So we had her mother come into Hamilton from Woodstock, Ontario. We fundraised about $10,000, just under like 9,000 and something from the community, from like call outs. Please help this woman. Please help her family. Her mother, we paid for her to stay at the Mark Priest House, which is a local organization that helps family members, give them a nice place to stay while they're in town and their family members are at the hospital.
Yeah.
We gave that check to her. We did a vigil. Like I have like it was all in the news. And the most powerful thing, because like her mom had some misunderstandings and misgivings about sex workers, calling them prostitutes and stuff, but she didn't have malice. It was just misgivings, right? And so the most beautiful part was when we were interviewed for the CHCH television, whatever, she got as part of I did a speech, she did a speech, we marched from the vigil to drop in space at Swap. But before that, she got to speak, her mom. And I'm not supposed to say their name, but I'm just thinking of their names, but I can't say them. But she died recently, the mother, last year of pneumonia and so she was a big smoker, unfortunately. But she said sex workers are human beings. No man should ever, essentially no person should ever have to be through an assault like this. And, it was beautiful to be able to have the collaboration. And the police did end up showing up at the vigil, and I asked them politely to leave because it just didn't seem fair and appropriate given, how many we're there for the sex worker's life. We're not there to be there for the state or police violence, regardless of when they're doing good things in certain moments. So like we had raised that money for the person who was attacked and her mother. We had gotten all of the articles, the interviews were about it. And the community really saw that vigil saw Swap Hamilton for what we are from that vigil and what we stand for and the dignity and the rights of people, regardless of what work they do. It's about standing in solidarity with people who are human beings and who live under capitalism, who have to, engage with poverty and navigate poverty in different ways and navigate being a working class person in this world, and especially people who are neurodivergent or racialized, and people who live with disabilities. Sex work, and people who do sex work is, like, it's not a monolith, of course.
Right, of course, yeah.
Right. But the people who engage in sex work often come from, their positionalities have been stratified in one way or another. And we have a wisdom because of our experiences in life.
Yeah, right.
That others don't. And so Swap Hamilton, we were kind of maligned they thought we were a brothel at first. Which is like, I get it.
But had a space.
We did.
It's interesting. So I had a similar it's not the same situation, but I was the founder with my partner of Swap Pittsburgh, and we don't run it anymore, but we did for a long time. And when we did an active campaign against the DA here for using condoms and cell phones as instruments of crime, we did like a big campaign against that. Lots of press were involved. We had the same thing where people were like interviewing us all the time and stuff. And when we built a coalition with Planned Parenthood and the ACLU and a bunch of folks to like sign on with us, this letter to the DA, he wrote back because he felt pressured to do so in this public statement. But at the beginning of it said, I wouldn't interact with this criminal organization. Like, which made me think of what you said, like they thought you had a brothel. Like they called us a criminal organization.
It's so erroneous, because if sex work wasn't illegal, we wouldn't be considered criminals or therefore organized crime. Right. It's self-referential and bullshit.
It is. So it's so interesting the way that these things get framed, and they're like, oh, you have this status as a sex worker, therefore everything that you're doing, including writing letters to the DA, is like criminal. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. I actually just want to pivot, because I recently was most recently was in the news because I had a counselor like a finding of a violation of the code of conduct, because when I won this award that I had mentioned, and I gave my speech and mentioned police violence, he tweeted, he called me and one of the other winners ungrateful, self-righteous toddlers with a microphone. And so he deleted the tweet. I reported it. There was an investigation, but in the Integrity Commissioner's report, while he did find a violation of the code of conduct on Councillor John Paul Danko's part, Integrity Commissioner made the comment that Vermilion has willfully and voluntarily traded off the complaint to enhance her media presence and stature in the community. Essentially, he called me a media whore in professional language. And the thing is that it's so offensive to me because, like, in the way that you just gave the example of the DA, sort of like anything you do as a person associated with or who is a sex worker is always criminal, inherently criminal.
Right. They're the criminal organization, this harm reduction group.
Like, oh my goodness. Like
they would mafia or something. I don't know.
They said the same thing about HIV groups, you know, if they were still criminalized. And so yeah, like he says this, but it's like it completely it's like the stigma in action, right? Like it discounts the things I have done in the community. It completely discounts the things that sex workers have done for the world. Like the internet we're using, the graphics, the payment processors, you know, just, I don't know. It's built on our backs, and yet we get blamed for existing. And that's why I've dedicated my life to this, because I think that it needs to be done.
So what's happening with let's circle back to your nursing. You said that, like, so all of this is the background of your life. So how is it impacting your nursing career right now?
So it's kind of all interrelated with the award, with my advocacy. Essentially, when I won that YWCA award, a bunch of my teachers congratulated me because they recognized me. So including the associate dean of my nursing college. So it kind of created a bit of notoriety within the college, but then it also kind of was against me because the teachers that didn't like me had more reason to not like me and to scrutinize me more, essentially. And like, I was subject to false allegations. Like, I essentially feel like they've essentially tried to disenfranchise me from, becoming more successful and achieving my goals. They made false allegations against me. When I went into do an exam, one of the students kept using under her breath the word ho, and like she was watching a TikTok video. So, plausible deniability. But like when I had asked her to not use hate speech casually, she was like, you could go sit somewhere else. And I'm like, I pay to be at this college just like you. I don't have, I have a right to be here. You don't have a right to say hate speech. The faculty didn't really do much. And so they apparently educated about the oppressive language that is, but there was, I just find I find post-secondary education institutions to be a farce. They're a corporation. They're just another form of capitalism. And unfortunately, they're gatekeepers for many of us. And
I left grad school before becoming a sex worker, and so I can't imagine trying to negotiate it as a sex worker, but just as a woman, it was a terrible experience. I was in a philosophy program, which is very male dominated, and there was so much gatekeeping and so much effort to push me out. And I stayed in my PhD program for 4 years, kind of out of spite, you're not going to push me out of this, just because you don't want a woman here. And then sometime 4 years into it, I was at the end of my 4th year, when I was going to run out of funding and I was I'm gonna have to pay for this myself, I hit this moment where I was wait, but do I want to hang myself on this cross? Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Argue with these assholes about my legitimacy in this field? I don't know that I want to spend my life with these assholes. And that was a hard moment for me. And I think I mourned that for a while, because I was I was not going to let them do that to me. And then I was then I had to balance that. Don't let them do this to you with how badly do I want to fight for my whole life? What if I just want to live? What if that sounds better to me? It's terrible. Thank you for listening to When We're Not Hustling. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Doing so will help other people find us. And if you're a sex worker who wants to come on the show and talk about your life outside of work, we would love to have you. Please send an email with more information to nothustlingpod@proton.me.
It is terrible. I can relate to you thinking about do I want to fight like this my entire life? And I think that maybe I'm the opposite, or the complementary, because for me in my life, I kind of think of myself as having been disposed by the world, but I'm still alive and I'm still here, and I'm still existing, and I'm still fighting and thinking and thrive. I'm not necessarily thriving, but I'm thriving in spite of what it could be.
Yeah.
And someone who has been homeless, someone who has struggled with a cocaine addiction in the past, as a result of being heartbroken. It's a complicated world. And I think that for me, I have a philosophical stance about my being. And it's and I said it in my speech too. I said, I'm happy to stand here as a symbol of a person, an avatar, and to say, because that's what I think I am. I don't think, especially as a trans woman, as well as a sex worker, the intersection of those identities and experiences. I think of Georgina Bayer, who helped decriminalize sex work in New Zealand in 2003, and even her talking about her experiences. I kind of think of myself as a whore nun, if you will. I have dedicated myself to sex work and people who labor in sex work, because our humanity is completely undermined, and
always in every corner.
Every corner in motherhood, in caregiving, in any form of knowledge brokering, if you will.
Right, despite the fact that we have knowledge that other people don't have, that they need,
and such important knowledge, such niche, rumors about police chiefs or people that we've seen as clients. And I've had Tie Cats players, and they blocked me on Twitter, like the famous football player. It's whatever. But for me, some people think about investing money. I think about investing inevitable suffering.
That's so
That's
interesting.
my philosophy
Yeah.
because I'm going to suffer. The world will make me suffer. So I'm going to make that worth something. So that's why I chose to stay in the terrible living situation when I was being harassed by the landlord, because if
Yeah.
you, I just, as much as like that's the system of gentrification, that's how they intend to, they want to make you voluntarily leave. They want to make it untenable.
Yeah.
I felt that as a working class person and as a person who has
Yeah.
done direct action movements for,
Yeah.
workers getting their wages back, stuff with the industrial workers of the world, I really just felt it imperative, and I felt the duty and the onus to remain so that I can at least, and I know it's not going to change the world for one apartment being the, you
Yeah,
know,
but I respect you so much for that. Like,
I
yeah,
respect me so much for that. And
you
thank you for
should.
saying
Yeah.
that. It's, like,
Because you made the choice too, like, because I did it for a long time. I was a student for a long time, and then I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the living example of the woman who made it despite the fact that it was miserable. But like, I could have made a different choice, and you like have made different choices. And I think that there are people who have to do that,
yeah.
in order for there to be any progress. Yeah.
I think what is unique about like what I have been able to accomplish is that a lot of the times I'm never like, I don't consider myself a shill. You know what I mean? Like I will, and it's a very much a goal of myself to remain authentic and genuine,
Yeah.
through and heart-centered through the work that I do and the advocacy work that I do, to be intersectional, as per Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, and to just be loving, and just to always speak truth to power. And for me,
I don't want to interrupt you, but like,
you're fine.
I do want to, like, how do you, how do you do that? How do you like, what do you do to stay loving, to like
I
not,
live through stories. Some
tell me
people
more
live
about that.
through
Yeah.
some people live through images. Some people live through textures, colors, thoughts. I live through stories and narratives.
I do
Um,
too, actually. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think part of me innately lived like that, and just because of like the kinds of media I have been exposed to. A kind of tidbit about me is that I was one of the first two youths to attend the group called OK to Be Me, which was a queer youth group, run out of a counseling organization called KW Counseling, Kitchener Waterloo Counseling. And oh, I'm gonna cry. Just thinking back, to like the opportunities and the things that I've been exposed to, and like how that I don't even want to use the word radicalized, because it's not radical to love your neighbor. It's
Yeah.
not it's not radical to
Yeah.
not be hateful. It's not radical at all. What's
Yeah.
radical is living in a world that we live in right now and trying to love.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I think that, sorry, you had a question. I feel like I was roundabouting.
No, I mean, the question was like, how do you continue to love after assault and after all of the things that you've been through? Because when I hear you talk about your work and when I hear you talk about your commitment to like sex worker rights, I hear like a love.
Thank you.
And
Exactly. You
and
make me cry.
and I think that that's you have to work to maintain that. And I'm wondering what you do to maintain that.
It's a very good question. I think I should do more to maintain it. I just think of my friends, to be honest. I
Mhm.
think of the people who have died.
Mhm.
I think of all of the artists and the people who lived with HIV who were not given, who were denied life.
Yeah.
I think of the people who used drugs who are not provided health care. I
Yeah.
think of the people who are not provided dignity.
Yeah.
And it drives me to stand in solidarity with all of our ancestors who, I think of Carol Lee,
Hmm.
the fact that we can speak about sex work, we can take that word for granted and the linguistic understanding of our economic exchanges for granted.
Right.
Um, I just think of my elders. I think of all the people that came before me, all of the struggles, all
Yeah.
of, I think of trans women and how much we've been robbed of participating in culture in an equitable and genuine sense, of how much, research about, think of the Nazi book burning of the Institute for Sexual Research. I think of the Library of Alexandria, and like my archival work, it all relates, my living through stories has only been exacerbated and enhanced by being an archivist.
It's so interesting that you say you live through stories, because I know, because you were working on this with, like in collaboration with my partner, you two and Alan, the sex chaplain, also helped a lot with this. It's funny because I talked to him yesterday and I was like, we still have some of your spreads. Give me your address. I'll send them back to you. And he was like, no, you guys can keep them. But for the people who have no idea what I'm talking about, like the three of you and maybe other people, I don't know who else, like collected every issue of Spread and archived them. And Spread is a sex worker magazine, in order to keep those things alive. And from what I saw as a secondary person, because I wasn't involved in this, but just living with someone who was, it was really difficult for you guys to find physical copies of all of these old magazines. And hearing you say that you live through stories and they motivate you makes that even more precious to me, that work. So yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And also it was really cool to collaborate with your partner, PJ, and Alan, the sex chaplain. I essentially, I knew about Spread just by having friends who were doing sex work. Of course, the magazine, I believe, ran from 2003 or 2 to 2008 or 7. It was like 5 to 6 years.
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for people that don't know. But it was such a unique magazine, a brilliant, beautiful magazine. The kinds of articles, the kinds of visualizations in it. It was groundbreaking in one of its kind, and also very full of love. It was made with love, and I think it represented sex workers in a great way. And also, there was information in the spreads about the various film festivals and different book recommendations. So Spread was also a part of how because obviously, as you can imagine, like, where do you start? Which books do I start with? So like, compile the list and, eventually work through them as far as pirating the copies. But for Spread, it was a labor of love. I mean, I was able to get into contact with PJ through this, and then also through to the Feminist Press, who published and printed the Spread magazine. They sent me all of their leftover copies of like all of the copies that they had, and they were happy that they were going to be archived. And just maybe I'll finish about Spread, and I'll talk a little bit about like how the archive project came to be and our collaboration with the public library. Yeah,
that would be great. I will give you a compliment real quick before you start that, though. PJ and I were just casually talking about it yesterday because I said I was going to be interviewing you, and they were like, she is so powerful. I do not know how she accomplished what she did so fast. PJ's like, that would have taken me so much longer. So they were so impressed with you, by the way.
That's so sweet. So what I did was that I went to the makerspace at our Hamilton Public Library, and I manually took the staples out, and thankfully the machine that, like, the photocopy machine that they had in the makerspace was the kind that, like, it could do double-sided, and it was really good with like not ruining the pages, because, like, of course the outside pages were thicker, but the inner pages were like that thinner newsprint that was very fragile. And so I would manually remove the staples and one by one go through and get the high quality copies. And then I would take them and put them into my PDF software. And because like it would come out like a rectangular image with both pages, like front and back, 4 pages. And I would cut it, and then you'd make, and then it'd order them. And then I would make sure also, one of the things that I do with my scans is making sure that, like, the way you read it in the PDF file is the exact same way you would see it in person if you were holding the book. That's something that a pet peeve about, like, when there's an extra white page and it moves the order so that it's not the same as the physical. Oh, I hate that. So I make sure that it was the same as the actual magazines.
Yeah.
I just, like, it was, as soon as I got as many of the magazines, I just dedicated myself to going to the makerspace and uploading them. And it did take a long time, but I guess it was faster than
what PJ thought they could have done. So that counts.
Oh, I'm sorry if I had referred to PJ as he. PJ uses they?
Hey, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I apologize. Good to know. Fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then the The archival project itself was something that I started during the pandemic, during the lockdown.
Mm-hmm,
I bought a Fujitsu scan snap. I think it's SV600 is the model number for them that are very curious. Book scanner, and basically started scanning old books that had never been digitized on sex work, by sex work. I started by talking to my friend Amy Lebovich, who is of the Terry Jean, Valerie Scott, and Amy Lebovich, the Terry Jean Bedford Supreme Court case in Canada in 2013/14, which decriminalized sex work in Canada, but then was removed because they instituted new criminal laws in 2014.
Yeah, you guys have like a kind of a Nordic model, right?
Yes. So they unfortunately criminalized the sale, which is for the first time since 2014, but also organizing around sex, and people who purchase it, as well as third parties, are all criminalized. What we have in Canada is...
What do they constitute organizing?
Organizing would be two sex workers organizing, or two sex workers working in a hotel, which is either trafficking, as you know, as they like to call it, or living off the avails of prostitution, or material benefit, or procuring. They could literally capture it in any of the criminal laws.
Yeah, really... right. So like if you had a roommate and you're paying rent, like they could also be criminalized.
I think that they've added like the prior to 2013, yes, but they added like some provision. But the point is that we're still criminalized, even if we can't be arrested for selling our own sexual services. And the police are going to not arrest you for that. They're going to arrest you for things that are captured under other laws related to sex work, not necessarily the sale of sexual services. So
right, that's what was happening here with our like instrument of crime stuff, because solicitation is just like a citation, but carrying an instrument of crime is something you can get booked for. So
is that what the condom was? Carrying an instrument of crime? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. I actually have the Matilda shirt. The condoms are not in evidence. In Pittsburgh they were instrument crime, which is even like trumps up the charges so much. Because those are laws that were meant for like bulletproof vests and weapons, not for condoms. That is wild. Meanwhile, like a harm reductive like prophylactic is being fought.
We had the Women's Law Center who like helped us with that, and it was so funny because one of the old white like lawyer ladies was so funny because she was like, the only way, like in her argument, she was like, the only way I can see using a condom as an instrument of crime is if you like wound it around someone's neck to choke them.
Use it as a garrote. Oh my God.
And I was like, it's so funny to see this like gray hair old lady like describing this.
Actually, you want to know, it's funny. So one of the things that my the superintendent and them did in harassing me, this is one way that I can see it as an instrument of crime, is they blew up condoms like balloons and put them on the walkway to my door when they were drunk.
Oh my God.
And when I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? They told people, oh, well, she's a prostitute. She did it. Like as if sex workers like blow up condom balloons as like Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs to their door. I'm like, no, don't. But the only thing
why would you? That's like bizarre.
Analogously, in ancient Egypt, they did wear sandals that would leave shape impressions in the sand as they would walk. So they would actually follow them like Hansel and Gretel. But we don't blow up condoms like balloons.
No. Now there's ways to give people your address without leaving breadcrumbs.
Like a telephone or like Grindr app, location send or whatever it is.
So our producer just said for the audience that Spread went from 2005 to 2011. So
perfect. Yeah. It was a very well-loved 6-year publication. I guess, do you want me to extrapolate about the archive project with archive collaboration with the library?
Mm-hmm.
So as I've mentioned, started during the pandemic, started with some of like my friends' books that they had in their own personal collection, like Valerie Scott and Amy Lebovich. Mm-hmm. And then essentially just started like buying books and eventually and retroactively applying for grants to like reimburse myself. I haven't been able to reimburse all of it.
But did you get some?
Some.
That's
like
great. Yeah.
Probably only like 25% of the entire cost. But I have spent right? I've spent about an excess of $15,000 on the amount of books in the collection because, and remember, I did sue the police and I won, and I did sue my landlord and won. So a lot of that money, I ethically didn't believe in. Like I put it back in a swap. The paintings that you see above me.
Oh my God.
They were all in the swap space. got Amy Lebovich, Carrie Jean Bedford, Valerie Scott, Danny Cockerline,
Wow.
Naomi Sayers, Mira Soleil Ross, and her partner who is deceased, Mark Karbusicki. You've got Wendy Babcock, who committed suicide after the state took her children away. You've got Yin Q. Oh my
Oh
God, how do I do this?
gosh.
Yin Q. You've
Yeah.
got Margot St. James, Carol Lee, Marsha P. Johnson, and then
Wow.
there's
The way
Oprah and
that you've
Laporta,
like put up all the news articles and stuff too is amazing.
and they're in aluminum, so they can't. Yeah.
That's
So
so wild.
that's Nina Arsenault and Christina Ortiz Rodriguez in the corner known as La Veneno. And then there's all the t-shirts. There's the Black Sex Worker Collective, the European Sex Worker
Wow.
Rights Collective, Coyote. We've got the Stella. Yeah, my life
Amazing.
is
That's
my life is.
amazing.
And then here's the Women of Distinction Award.
That's
Actually,
amazing.
it's like a little metal thing. I don't need to show you it, but
No, but it's so great. Yeah.
so started books, and then essentially I had reached out to the Hamilton Library as the founder of Swap, and I had met with their CEO Paul Takala and one of the like head librarians. She works at a Toronto library now, but we essentially like the person that has been associated with the project has rolled over a couple of times just because
Mhm.
of the way that the library works. But we originally worked with Karen Milligan from the local history and archives portion of Hamilton Library, Public Library, just had a conversation and was like, look, this is a project that I'm starting. It's going to be like a long-term thing. It's going to
Yeah.
be like a living project essentially.
Yeah.
And we would love to collaborate with the public library. And essentially we have a memorandum of understanding. Any physical copy of a book, which is why I purchased the physical copies. There are many digital copies that don't have physical counterparts in the archive. However, the library has agreed with Swap Hamilton through the Memorandum of Understanding that through the controlled digital lending legislative framework of lending books digitally in North America, basically the Hamilton Public Library has offered and is currently using their institutional privilege to upload to the Internet Archive all of the physical versions so that they don't get sued of the digital versions of the physical copies that we have in our
Yeah.
archive, which is a lot. Like it's probably like 7 or 8 bankers boxes worth of books.
Yeah.
And yeah, like incredibly rare. Like I'm the first person, we talked about Spread, for example. I'm
Yeah.
also the first person and the only person to archive Pandering by Heidi Fleiss because it's a huge book. And that
Wow.
in collaboration with McMaster University's archive like section of the university because it was a larger book. So my book scanner couldn't fit the dimensions
Yeah.
of the book within the scan area. So
Yeah.
we collaborated with Alex what's his last name? Alex Cortez Furtado, I believe it is.
Okay.
From McMaster University. I just wanted to make sure I said his name so it wasn't because he actually scanned that book for the project
Oh,
because
yeah.
he
Yeah.
was an employee of the archives
Yeah.
and the machine was so
Yeah.
expensive. But yeah, so the idea is that the archive in the future, once it's all cataloged and it should be complete within the next 2 years, it will be uploaded for public access to the Internet Archive. And we know that their lawsuit is ongoing, and
Amazing.
unfortunately, it's not looking good. But we are still trying our best to make
Yeah.
sex work fawns. And
I
as
was at earlier this year or in January, I was at UNLV because UNLV just opened their sexual economies archive there. So it seemed like that, which was very exciting. Do you know about that?
no, I didn't.
Okay, so UNLV with Lynn, do you know Lynn Camella?
No.
She wrote a book called Vibrator Nation. She's a women and gender studies professor at UNLV. She's worked with like Barb Brents and some of the other people who are doing like sex work histories. She does more like sexual commerce, but like sex toy shops, and like she's followed all of this. She wrote this book 5 years ago called Vibrator Nation, where she like interviews all the people of like Babeland and all of these different places about these like pleasure centered places. But she thought that UNLV because there's such a rich like sex work history in Nevada should have an archive like what you're talking about. And they got it pushed through and they got tons of donations, especially like from a lot of pornography donations in all different kinds of media from a lot of like gay and queer folks in San Francisco that donated their entire like libraries to UNLV. So there was a big launch event of that. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the information when we get off this. But that was very cool. And it seems like it's neat to me that like in the zeitgeist in all these different places, there's this interest in preserving sex work history.
Yeah, and I think for Hamilton it's really important. Because Hamilton is a really labor-centric city. We are known for being incredibly in solidarity, and also Hamilton has the largest per capita amount of people living with disabilities in Canada. So it's a really interesting intersection of labor and disability. And I am a woman who lives with disabilities as well as is trans, and so it's interesting for me. I will say that we, like through my gumption and through, like a commitment, I've been able to like foster those relationships with local district labor councils. And like I was nominated for the Ontario Federation of Labor Pride and Solidarity Champion Award last year. And
amazing. Yeah.
I wanted to mention also the archive was listed as a national archives, ARQUIVES, which is basically our national queer archives in Toronto.
That's
Vaughn's
so
collection.
cool.
So,
yeah.
like what I find is there's a lot of potential for capacity building with archives, but I do find that there are some archivists who are not very nice.
Interesting.
I find that they're in archive. So it's been controversial because I've had a lot of people be like, can you please remove my book from your archive? And I'm like, no, I won't. I will not. I'm sorry, because it's not for commercial exploitation.
Yeah.
And first of all,
are they concerned that their book sales will go down if they could be accessed, or what is the reason that they want their books removed?
I imagine that is the bread and butter of the argument. But I think, for example, like if we're going to be really having a critical lens on that kind of exploitation, they need to be taking it up with their publishers and not me.
Yeah.
Just leave it at that. Okay.
Yeah.
The pimps and not me. And I purchased a copy of your book. And what's the difference between me purchasing a DVD and having my friend come over and watch it on my television when I don't watch them?
Yeah.
Here to sharing because I grew up in the day of LimeWire. I believe in copyleft. I'm an anarchist. I believe in, I believe that copy is right, not copyright.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of Andrew Hunter, bless his heart. He ran the Global Network of Sex Work Projects for a period of time, which was then turned over to Ruth Thomas.
Okay.
So what I find in archival work is that there can be a lot of gatekeepers, is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, my goal with my archive has been to reduce the barriers, reduce the access. And again, when you have access to a book on Internet Archive, like the people who are wanting your book, who are interested in your publication, are more likely to buy something if they've been able to like be exposed to it. And I'm not trying to make an argument for you'll get exposure. What I am trying to say is that there's court precedent out of Spain that says a free copy does not equal a lost sale, essentially, is what the precedent, the jurisprudence says in Spain. And I personally,
I know for myself that when I found something that's interesting, I will then go and buy it. Yeah.
Exactly what I was saying here. Like I find if I really like a musician's like album, I'll buy the vinyl, I'll buy the digital, and I'll buy the CD. All of it. Just to support that artist and something I really like after I have downloaded it illegally. Because I do love physical media. And I'm actually curious, could I maybe segue into talking about the second? I don't think you even know about it necessarily, but we recently got a $20,000 grant from McMaster University for a zine project.
I do not know about that. Yeah, tell me about that.
So the zine project, we recently got $20,000. It is through it was the inaugural Societal Impact Seed Grant through McMaster University, McMaster Research. What it is it's in collaboration with Dr. Andrea Zafiro, who is a communication studies doctor. The original proposal was inspired by both Other Weapons Distro and Hacking Hustling's publications. We proposed to create a series of zines, the first one being about cybersecurity by and for sex workers, of course, as inspired by Hacking Hustling, but specifically in
we're having Blunt on in a couple weeks, so that's fun.
You're having who on?
Blunt, Mistress Blunt from Hacking.
Oh, love it. Love it. Love it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And actually, I will say my archive was controversial, and they actually had made a statement about intellectual property as a result of my archive. So it has created some controversy among even the more forward-thinking sex worker groups that are there. And I think that, that's not the analysis, because I think I'm pretty sure it was Melissa Gier Grant who wrote that. And I'm pretty sure we have some disagreements about intellectual property, but that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah.
And the Zine project, the first one, is about cybersecurity, but we essentially wanted to create more print media in the in the vein of Spread, in the vein of other print media that has been lost to the ephemeral nature of paper.
Do you know Red's Chuta?
I do. I always buy every one of their copies when they release, and I upload them to the archive, and I got their parents and caregiving shirt. Totally.
Because as you speak, I hear her voice, or their, sorry, let me say this again. As you're speaking, I'm hearing their voice too, because I've interviewed them and they're so into like collecting ephemera. And when I interviewed them, they were talking about all of the ephemera in their house, which reminded me of your house. And I remember them saying, it's screaming at me.
It's true. There's something really precious about media, and like going back to, purchasing something, that's, it's all related. The first one's supposed to be about cybersecurity. The other 5 are in the works, if you will, but like some ideas we wanted to do one maybe about like major activists spaces and a little blurb about them. One could be like the Canadian legislative history and like the major players in the lawsuits. Another one could be like we wanted to focus a really unique zine, which is sex workers and the and technology. So like how sex workers helped, like the momentum of developing the internet and the momentum of developing these different technologies like payment processors and visual images. Like we used to use ASCII coding to make sexy images, and then GIFs, sort of titillating images, and then tart cards from the UK to advertise their services in phone booths, before the internet, and like the actual use of pimps I don't want to say in a positive sense, I mean in this classical sense. A pimp was a networker before the internet existed, before we had ways to advertise ourselves independently. So we want to like capture how sex workers have revolutionized the internet, and how essentially the world is built on our flesh and our backs, but we are franchised out of those same spaces, like in censorship on Twitter, and not being.
You see that with every single one of these websites, with Patreon, with OnlyFans, that they like build themselves up until they gain some legitimacy, and then they're like, we're getting rid of all the whores. Like, I mean, and some of them are like, wait, that was a bad idea. Let's bring the whores back. There's no money.
Literally, I think that was OnlyFans, right?
OnlyFans did that, but Patreon is still like, we don't do that. We promote writers and artists, and okay.
Like we're all the above.
Yeah, right.
Well, I know we're a little bit over time, so I'll leave it at that. But honestly, thank you so much for picking my brain.
Oh, I loved doing it, and I have so many other things that I want to ask you about, so we'll have to have you back. But
3 questions.
We end every episode with 3 questions. So what are you reading right now? It sounds like a million things.
Yeah, a million things. So I mean, I guess there's like nursing stuff, but if we're talking about like personal life, it's the Sluts anthology, Michelle T.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I just got it.
What are you listening to?
I listen to a lot of Slater. I listen to like Azealia Banks, Slater.
DJ and I are going to a Slater Kenny concert.
Oh my god, I love it!
Anniversary, which is just a coincidence, but like they're coming to Pittsburgh.
I am jealous. I'm wanting to see Cyndi Lauper on her farewell tour. I don't know if it'll happen. I also love Kim Petras. I'm drawing a blank. I'm looking at like my 200 vinyl records, and I can't think of what I listen to. I listen to a lot of electronic.
Nice.
Yeah, and then your third question.
My third question is, what are you excited about?
Ooh, I'm excited for revolution.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. You can find me all over the internet. Google Jelena Vermilion, Jelena Vermilion, or on Twitter, Isis Intrepid, ISISINTREPID. And my Instagram has an underscore in between Isis and Intrepid.
Nice. It was so great to talk to you.
You as well. Thanks so much, darling.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I'm your host, Jessie Sage. You can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or visit my website at jessiesage.com. The show was produced by Emily Foster and the music is by Benjamin J. Beninati. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Not Hustling Pod. To support the show and get sneak peeks, please go to patreon.com/sapiotextual. For more information about our show and what we do here, please visit our website at nothustling.com. Signing off. Have a great week.